Hello, Symposiast. I'm Dr. Angela Puca. As you know, I'm a religious studies PhD and university lecturer, and this is your online resource for the academic study of magic, esotericism, paganism, shamanism, and all things occult. As always, I'd like to remind you that there are many ways to support my work if you like me to keep going with providing free academic scholarship on all things esoteric. As part of my project, as you know, it is to bridge the gap between academics and practitioners. The world of academia, which tends to be an ivory tower, and it's difficult to access, which is one of the reasons why I created this project, to make scholarship more accessible to the public, but also the world of practitioners, because it's also important to listen to practitioners' voices. And today will be one of those cases, because I will introduce in a second our special guest today. I just want to clarify as a disclaimer that I tend to not be adversarial, or I don't create drama on my channel, at least not on purpose anyway. So anything that my guests will say is not my opinion, so I don't endorse their view. So today we will have a special guest, a practitioner, Phil Hine, who's famous for Chaos Magick, but as we will see, he's also done much work in other fields as well that we will explore tonight. So help me all in welcoming our guest for this episode, which is Phil Hine.
Hello.
Hi, Phil.
Hi.
Thank you so much for being a guest on my channel. How are you today?
I'm very well, thank you. How are you?
I'm okay. I hope that we will have, it sounds like we will have an interesting conversation today. So I'd like to ask you as my first question, how did your journey in Chaos Magick? I know we will talk about more than just Chaos Magick, but since most people know you via that, so could you please tell us a bit more about your journey and how you got into Chaos Magick? And then it will be also interesting to understand what is your current relationship with Chaos Magick.
Okay, well, let me see. I think I first picked up Ray Sherwin's The Book of Results, probably about 1979, 1980, something like that. And I started experimenting with sigils. At the same time, I was doing a postal correspondence course with a traditional Western magical order called the Order of the Cubic Stone. This was obviously long time before the internet reared its head. So yeah, everything was done by post. So I had to do magical exercises, keep a diary, send off reports to this guy who was mentoring me. And I think in one of my letters I said, I've got this thing in the Book of Results and I'm trying sigils. And I was roundly ticked off and told that doing sigil magic was really dangerous and it was for a beginner kind of thing. And, you know, I shouldn't be doing it. And I thought, yeah, fuck off, you know. I basically ignored his advice. He also told me off for spelling magic with a K, because apparently that was a Thelemic thing. And I wasn't really aware that there was a thing called Thelema at the time. But he kind of sent me this letter saying, "We are not Thelemites!" exclamation, exclamation, exclamation. And I was kind of, okay. So yeah, around the same time I got hold of, I think, the first edition of Pete Carroll's Liber Null. And I don't think the phrase Chaos Magick per se was in either book at the time. You know, Chaos Magick as a concept was still somewhere up on astral plane, if you like. But I thought it was interesting. I think it was while I was at Huddersfield Poly that I did my first experiments in what later became called Cthulhu Mythos Magic. I did a Cthulhu pathworking and tried to summon Yog-Sothoth on top of a hill at midnight, which was fun, let's say. But, you know, that was really before I had a clear idea of what Chaos Magick was, or in fact, a clear idea that there were, you know, distinctions between different magical genres. It was all just one exciting thing for me. And then after I'd finished my degree, social sciences degree, psychology, sociology, philosophy, all that kind of stuff, I moved back to my hometown, and I got initiated into a Wiccan coven. And I talked to the high priestess of the coven about this book of results and leave a null, and she was kind of like, well, it's interesting. I don't have time to read it. I don't know anything about it. Why don't you find out more about it and tell me? And I was kind of like, okay, cool. So I just bobbled along, for a few years doing this and that and the other. I went and worked on a kibbutz between 1981 and 1982. And while I was there, I did, Libre MMM, the training program that was in the front of Libre Null. And then when I came back, I moved to various places. I spent some time in Nottingham, where I hooked up with a theatrical improv group that did some really interesting work. And then I moved to Huddersfield again for a while. And then I ended up in Leeds in about, I think it was 86, 87, something like that. And I kind of got hooked into the emerging Leeds Chaos Magick scene. Sort of Dave Lee, Ray Sherwin, people like that. It was a very vibrant thing. And I just kind of like, bobbled along and read whatever books were around and kept trying stuff out, really.
How was it to be there when it all started?
It was great. It was really interesting. It was vibrant. There was a lot of crossover between people on different trajectories, if you like. I also got involved in EMUCOS, the Arcane and Mystical Order of the Knights of Shambhala, the East-West Tantric group, whilst I was in Leeds. I'd been interested in Tantra ever since about 1982. So there's actually not that much, of a gap between getting interested in Chaos Magick, joining a Wiccan coven, and getting interested in Tantra. It all kind of like happened at the same time. So while I was in Leeds, I was indulged in the Leeds Chaos scene, which was mostly around Leeds University Occult Society. I met up with Rodney Orpheus, who you probably know, he's a rock star and a Thelmite. And together we created a monthly pagan magazine called Pagan News, which ran for about 4 years on and off, and was, quite successful. In a very small way, of course. And I was also involved in EMUCOS, as I said, the East-West Tantric Order, the Esoteric Order of Dagon, which was a kind of like sect of Cthulhu fanciers. Very strange people they were. And I just got involved. Oh yeah, I had run a sort of Discordian Wiccan group for a while as well, called MC Medusas and Hydra's Teeth. So we were kind of like I had a great time, on the Satanic Panic was going on. I kept busy.
I can imagine. What led you to also be initiated in Wicca? Just curious.
They were the first other occultists I contacted with. I mean, I spent 3 years at Huddersfield doing the social science degree. I met a few other, solo practitioners there. And then when I moved back to my hometown, I was leafing through an old edition of Chris Bray's magazine, The Lamp of Thoth, and I found this kind of like, Wiccan coven in wherever wants new people, ring this number. So I was kind of like, woo, great. And I rang the number, met them, eventually got initiated. I think if I'd had a choice, I probably wouldn't have gone for Wicca. I'd have gone for something a bit more dark. But they were the only game in town, So I went and got initiated and spent several years having a real interesting time, And I got into the Northern English Wiccan scene, which is quite cool, and met loads of people, and I got into big fights and did weird rituals. It was great.
How do you think it is the Northern English occult scene now? Do you think that it has changed since those times?
I don't know, because I haven't been up north for must be getting on 20 years really. I've still got mates who are up there who I think they live in Ilkley. You know, Phil Lagarde's just done his PhD on the occult. And I'd like to go back and have a wander around and have a gander and see what's going on, but I've really no idea. You know, I've been in London the last 25 years or so.
I see that. And do you think that, even though it was kind of accidental, but do you think that your initiation into Wicca has had any influence on your practice?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, I got further into Chaos Magick through Wicca because I got into the goddess Eris and that whole Discordian scene, and I approached Eris very much from a Wiccan point of view. Did lots of like Wiccan rituals with Eris as the goddess and getting possessed by her and having a channel communication with her on Stockport Station. That was fun. And you know, I've got old friends who say, "Oh, you're still a witch at heart, Phil," which I think is nice, you know. And I get occasionally invited to big do's and gatherings, and that's nice. And I think what Wicca gave me was a love for goddesses. That's the way my religious fervor goes. Is I'm really into goddesses, and I think really that's what drew me further and further towards Tantra in the end. Is that you know, extremely personal and devotional goddess sensibility.
I see. And so what is Chaos Magick? Because I know that different practitioners would give different answers. So what is Chaos Magick to you?
That's always a really hard question, because I think anything I've written, you know, back in the 90s, I'm not going to agree with now. I think the last time I tried to define Chaos Magick for anybody, I said it was chaos. I think it was magic without occultism, which sounds like a real paradox. But what I was trying to get to with that statement was the idea that Chaos Magick, for me, is skeptical of a lot of the, you know, the narratives and tropes of occultism, and looks at, you know, if you like, circulating occult narratives with a skeptical eye, and also has the other skeptical eye on its own emergent narratives. So I'd say it's a kind of like a skeptical approach to magical practice.
What do you think are the main narratives in occultism that Chaos Magick challenges?
Well, where to start? I mean, you know, that the idea that there are multiple astral planes for a start, you know, that's an idea that doesn't really emerge until you get the Theosophical Society, but that's amazingly popular. Personally, I don't believe in an astral plane at all. So, you know, and I think doing Chaos Magick enabled me to challenge that whole thing about, oh, you know, I'm an authority, you should listen to me because I've been on the astral plane and I've met the Buddha, blah, 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 you know. I think, mind you, there's a lot of chaos magicians who are really into astral plane stuff. So, you know, who knows? But for me, it's about kind of like, if you're kind of like taking things apart, questioning things, looking behind the scenes, you know, being skeptical, being curious about anything, really. That's what Chaos Magick is for me. And also having fun. You know, the magic nowadays tends to still cleave in two major directions. It's either about, you know, personal growth or spiritual growth, whatever people mean by that, I don't know. Or self-transformation in one way or another, or it's about, you know, scoring, you know, fit partners or a new pair of training shoes or a new car or a better job or whatever. In the middle of there, you can, well, it's just about having fun, really, and being a bit silly. And I think if I've made any contribution to Chaos Magick, which is doubtful at best, it's that, you know, magic can be fun and it can be silly, and we don't have to take ourselves too seriously. Because I think, yeah, another thing is occultists do tend to take themselves a bit seriously. You know, there's a fine line between being an occult adept and an arsehole. I think that's something that Chaos Magick helps people watch for, really.
I can see how you would work with Eris as a goddess. But I was wondering, so what do you think makes magic effective? And what would you do magic for, other than having fun?
What do I think makes magic effective? I think emotional engagement is really important. You know, if you can connect with something emotionally, it doesn't matter whether it's some traditional technique you've got out of the 14th century grimoire or something you've made up in the pub with a couple of mates. What makes it work is emotional engagement. And it's that same emotional engagement which allows us to reach out to people, you know, to heal our friends, stick pins in a doll of Rishi Sunak, whatever, you know. It's that personal, it's that emotive wish to connect and to change the world. I think that's what's important. As to how it works, I don't know. I've kind of abandoned that whole explanatory thing. I've never been fond of the whole quantum-ray, you know. Quantum physics explanations leave me cold. Psychological explanations have their limits. I think if there is anybody going to come up with a viable explanation of magic, it has to be interdisciplinary at the very least. But I kind of I get bored with explanations because I see them as limitations.
But in terms of the practical side of magic, what do you think makes magic effective? Or is it nothing at all? Is it just the emotional connection, regardless of whether you use sigils or hyper sigils?
I think the emotional connection is important. As to what else makes it effective, I don't know. It's not something I've given a lot of thought to over the past 2 or 3 decades, really. You know, when it works, it works. When it doesn't work, it doesn't work. I'm very interested in the fact that it doesn't work sometimes because a lot of magicians really don't want to go there. You know, they want to be seen as powerful, resilient, you know, the sort of person you'd buy a sigil off for 60 quid on the internet. Nobody wants to talk about when magic doesn't work, which I think is actually really interesting.
And do you try and find an explanation as to why magic doesn't work?
No, but I'm interested in the fact that we don't like to talk about why it doesn't work, you know.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think it's an interesting thing to cover for those who are practitioners to kind of investigate when magic doesn't work. I'm just wondering, do you think that your lack of explanation of how magic works or doesn't work, is it affecting the effectiveness of your magic? Because if you don't have an interest in understanding how it works, do you think that it could affect negatively the effectiveness of your magic? Because if you don't know why it didn't work, then you cannot avoid doing that thing for which your magic working was not effective.
No.
Okay, so it's just random trials and errors.
It's complicated, and I'd like to see somebody. Yeah, it's complicated. That's all. And I don't know whether it's random. You know, it's an interesting thing is that when the magic works, it's a sign that you're a good practitioner. When the magic doesn't work, it's because the universe didn't want it to, or your karma, or you got a decimal point wrong, or you used the wrong kind of incense. So there's 2 different explanations going on there. You know, yeah, it's complicated. I haven't come up with a satisfactory model that works for me yet. Maybe somebody else will do. Maybe I will do eventually. I don't know.
And what is your current relationship with Chaos Magic? Do you still practice it, or is it something that you have distanced yourself from?
Yeah, I don't really see myself as a Chaos magician anymore. I mean, I haven't really. I stopped practicing it as a majority thing, let's say, by the late 1990s. I occasionally chat to people who are still doing Chaos Magic. Sometimes we have interesting conversations. Sometimes it just kind of like, oh, shut up, you old git. What do you know? You know, I'm a bit of an ancient dinosaur, I think, compared to some of the young people doing it these days. But it's always been my hope that you know, a new generation of people will take up the bare bones of chaos magic as defined by the various people who wrote the first books about it and just go, either throw it all out and say it's bollocks and come up with their own chaos magic, which would be really good, or just surpass us, you know, come up with new ideas. Don't cleave to the same old shit that gets circulated in book from book without any intervening at all. Do new stuff, you know. I think I did something recently called Queerying Chaos Magic with Patricia McCormack. I don't know if you know Patricia.
I don't think so.
Professor of Continental Philosophy at Angela Ruskin University.
Oh, okay. I get who she is now.
That was kind of interesting, and I've since talked to more, if you like, radical queer chaos practitioners who seem to be doing some interesting stuff. So I'd like to see more work, well, if not writing, then at least kind of like presentations coming out from people who are into that kind of queering chaos magic angle, because I think that's really interesting. Well,
what do you mean by queering chaos magic?
I mean by taking chaos magic principles, which are very few, and approaching them with a queer sensibility. More than that, I can't really say. But that, I find that interesting. And what I'm not interested in is people just recycling the same old stuff. So I've had quite a few arguments with people who come up with, oh well, you know, to create a servitor, it's really difficult. You have to jump through all these hoops, and it's kind of like, nah, it's not. It's really simple to create a servitor, you know. Or to do a sigil, you have to do this and that and the other, you know. Magicians have this weird tendency of making simple things really complicated. And what I liked about chaos magic was a kind of reversal of that and say, well, let's keep this as simple as possible. Anybody can do it. You don't need to have, you know, memorized the tree of life. You don't need to have got special tools. You know, you could just, it's a kind of DIY ethos, which I think was, for me, a really powerful thing.
And what led you to move away from chaos magic? Because you said you haven't really identified as a chaos magician ever since the 1990s.
I think my interest in Tantra just came to dominate, really.
Can you tell us a bit more about that, about your interest in Tantra? And
well, as I say, that started in the early 80s. It started because I came back from working on a kibbutz in Israel and just thought, I'm going to have a break from all this weird shit. You know, I'm not going to do any rituals. I'm not going to get in contact with the covens or any of the Wiccans. Going to, you know, just sit and chill out for a few months. And what happened was I started having these recurring dreams about Carly. And I probably had some idea of who Carly was through reading Kenneth Grant, but not much, you know. I certainly had no interest or didn't feel drawn or memories of a past life as an Indian or any of that bollocks. But I kept getting the same dream every night, you know, Carly with streaming hair and surrounded by fire. And that I think after that, that's kind of what got me interested in Tantra. But it took me ages to find somebody who actually shared my interest, if you like. I mean, there are lots of, you know, people doing the whole neo-tantric sacred sex stuff, but I wasn't particularly interested in that. I wanted to do tantric ritual. And it wasn't until 1987 when I was in Leeds, and this guy rocked up and gave a talk at Leeds University Occult Society on Tantra. He became my acharya and initiated me into a mukos. So that, you know, that was already, that strand of my occult trajectory was already in play as I was getting into chaos magic. And I think as time moved on, I just got more and more fascinated by the tantric material and not really interested in the chaos magic stuff, which a lot of it I found really boring.
And so what is the type of tantra that you practice?
I call it hybridized tantra, which is an acknowledgement that I'm not trying to, you know, I'm not a reconstructionist, and I am obviously influenced by my background and culture. that's why I call it hybridized Tantra. It's a light form of Sri Vidya. Sri Vidya, as you probably know, is started off as a kind of Kaula tradition and then became more normalized. And it's the central deity of Sri Vidya is the goddess Lalita or Tripura Sundari.
And what are the practices that are involved?
Sorry?
What are the practices that are involved?
Okay, very simple.
And the beliefs as well.
Very simple. I do a lot of meditation. I do a lot of meditation where I place the goddess in my heart, and everything that I experience becomes a sacrifice to her. Do puja, which is more elaborate ritual occasionally. I read the devotional literature. I read the scriptural literature. I try and make sense of it. It's often really difficult. But yeah, I don't do anything really complicated. It's very simple stuff.
So the purpose of your practice, as I'm understanding it, is more devotional and I wouldn't say theological, because maybe that conjures images of 14th century grimoires, but is it more aligning yourself with the deity, or do you also do magic to affect your reality and the circumstances that you will find yourself in?
Yeah, both. And that's often the same procedure. Yeah, if we're doing a Ganesha puja, then we'll often mention people who are friends of ours who are having a really hard time, or events that we'd like Ganesha to give a nudge on. But the aim of the aim of any tantric practice is to dissolve the distinction between you and your deity, or you and consciousness, if you like. Obviously, there's a really complicated philosophy behind that I don't have time to go into.
Yeah, I've studied Sanskrit during my university formation, so I'm familiar with Tantra and the Sri Vidya tradition. But I'm also interested in how it is reinterpreted today, and how it is reinterpreted here in the UK by practitioners such as yourself. So that's why I'm asking these questions, because I think it's fascinating how these things get reframed. That there are parts that are taken from the tradition and parts that are reframed because it's a different context.
Yeah, well, I think that's inevitable that with any tradition, there's going to be historical elements that are considered to be canonical, and then people will naturally reframe the tradition in terms. I mean, that's what's happened with. If you look at the history of Sri Vidya, it starts out as a love cult. It's a very erotic cult, and most of the magic is actually love magic. And then it kind of merges with the Kashmiri Shaivism around about the 13th century and takes that on. No, sorry, a lot earlier than that, 10th century. If you look at some of the mid-level scriptures, they're very much influenced by the Pratyabhinya philosophy. And then over the centuries until the modern day, I mean, a lot of Sri Vidya practitioners don't think of it as Tantra at all, because it's anything that has become progressively deemed to be transgressive has been edged out of it. Although there are still people producing fairly scriptural and exegetical material in the 19th century, some of which is still seen as quite radical.
Yeah, I thought that we could get mildly controversial. You said that that you disagree with something that I mentioned in one of my episodes about the inclusion of Chaos Magick in the left-hand path.
Yeah, I don't really see that at all.
Okay, so why do you think that?
Okay, well, correct me if I'm misremembering this, but I seem to recall there were 4 points, and one was individualism. Second was self-deification. Third was iconoclasm, and fourth, transgression.
Iconoclasm and antinomianism, yes.
Okay, well, let's take the individual thing first. I don't. Okay, there aren't that many, Western esoteric movements that aren't individual to some degree. I mean, Thelema, every man, every woman is a star. Wicca, the whole idea that power comes from within. Even the relationship between you and Jesus in the Protestant church is individual. So I don't really see individual as being a strong indicator of left-hand pathness, if you like.
The individualism of the left-hand path, more than just serving your own path, is more about tailoring your practice based on your individual personal needs, as opposed to, for instance, following a specific tradition. So even though there are practitioners that are trying to serve their own path by following, for instance, I don't know, Freemasonry or a traditional form of Wicca, or a grimoire traditional a grimoire tradition, they would still follow certain rules that are part of the tradition. Whereas in left-hand path traditions, there tends to be more of a tailoring of the practice based on yourself, as opposed to a set of rules and dogmas. So it's part of the rejection of dogmas and the tailoring of the practice upon yourself, as opposed to following a specific tradition with certain principles, dogmas, and set practices. So that is the type of individualism that you find in the left-hand path, in left-hand path traditions.
Okay, Western left-hand path traditions, because I don't really see that in Tantric left-hand path.
No. When we talk about left-hand path traditions, and even in my videos, I think I clarified that it's not the Vamachara Marga, it's not the Tantric, the Indian Tantric form. It is the Western traditions. That's why the ones that are included under the umbrella of left-hand path traditions are things like Chaos Magick and even forms of Satanism, there are different forms of Western practices that are included under that umbrella because they match those criteria.
Okay, so how about self-deification then?
Okay, so the idea of self-deification, if you look at, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you look at the works, for instance, by Peter Carroll, and the idea of you studied yourself when it comes to, even though you were talking more about your tantric practice, that the aim is to become the divine, to become the deity. And this is something that transpires also in Chaos Magician's works, the idea of the Zos and the Kia that have to become one, the idea that the power comes from the chaos, because chaos is this primordial force, and that the individual is something that veils it in a way, so that the things that belong to the individual, instead of helping you towards that union, they are hindering you. So that's why there's a stripping down of all the rules and all the shenanigans as they are seen from ritualisms, so that you can more directly become one with the source and act from that point, from that primordial chaos, which is the infinite potential.
Wow. Okay. I don't think I ever took that stuff very seriously. I gather. I was never into that whole Kia business, so I'll obviously just pass that by. Yeah, okay. That's fair enough. Okay. We won't bother with the other two then, because I obviously, a lot of what I think this is for me a strength of Chaos Magick, that if you don't like something that's in a book, you just ignore it. You don't have to feel hidebound to go with it, because you just say, "Oh well, he's talking bollocks," obviously, That's what I did. That's fine. I took bits out of Pete Carroll's stuff that I liked and just waved the rest of it aside.
Yeah, I mean, it's totally legitimate. Everybody can construct their own practice. This is exactly what we're talking about. I
guess that's the individual thing coming in.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I get that.
Making your
I don't know about the self-deification thing, because it's not, that's a general idea in Tantric. It actually first emerges in the early scriptures of the Shaivas Vedanta, which we would now call the right-hand path. So the idea of self-deification being a left-hand path thing is, from a Tantric point of view, completely erroneous, but people still go on about it, But I never was really even aware of that there was a whole self-deification element of chaos magic.
That's okay. So can you tell us a bit more about your, the kind of practices and beliefs that are part of the Tantric tradition, and also then we can talk about your books and which one is your favorite. I've decided that we can.
Which one of my books is my favorite? That's a good one. I don't really. I think the Pseudonomicon, actually, because it's really short, and I made a lot of it up.
Okay.
Hence the name Pseudonomicon. The latest one, Chakra. Actually, my utter favorite is Queerying Occulture. I like it so much. I can't even believe that I wrote it. I think somebody else might have snuck in and used my word processor and put some stuff in it that I certainly don't remember writing. That's my favorite book, actually. That's the book I wanted to write for 20 odd years, if not longer.
And what makes it your favorite?
I think because it just brings together, my love of history, my continual anger, the way that queer people are often excluded from having a place in modern society, and the way that for so long queer practitioners were just not allowed to be present. If you look at a lot of early 20th century occultism, the stuff I grew up with, if you were queer, you were on the left-hand path. If you're homosexual, you're a black magician. Fuck off, that still makes me angry, and those kind of attitudes were still prevalent up until the late 90s, and you still encounter them nowadays. In fact, when that book came out, I had some American podcaster contact me and said, I really like to talk to you about queering a culture, but I don't want to talk about the politics. So, well, I start off by mentioning Roe versus Wade. So how can we avoid the politics? We can't, So that interview didn't happen.
Yeah, we also had a chat about the fact that I also tend to not talk about politics, but when it is part of somebody's practice, then of course it makes sense to talk about it. So feel free to elaborate more on that, because when it is an integral part of the esoteric practice that you're talking about.
I did a book last year I self-published it about the same time that I did Queerying Occulture, and it's called Acts of Magical Resistance, and it's basically a very shortish book talking about the way that magic has been used in the UK as a tool for political resistance, most on either an environmental or a if you like, a queer left-wing agenda, because I'm very left-wing in my politics. And I remember reading this book that I think the Witchcraft Museum put out, and it was kind of like a history of magical resistance. It's a really interesting book, but they kind of jumped from, they had Greenham in, and then they jumped from Greenham to Trump. And I just thought, well, what about all the anti-poll tax stuff that was done in the 80s and 90s? What about the road protests? A lot of magicians were involved in that. What about the anarchists stop the city? None of that stuff was mentioned. So I thought, well, what I want to do is just mention a lot of the sort of political magic I've done over the years. So Acts of Magical Resistance is available on Amazon as a print or PDF book, and it's short, it's punchy, it's got cartoons in it. What more do you want?
So do you think, let me see if I'm understanding you correctly, do you think that magic has been used in the UK specifically as a tool of resistance from people that are marginalized?
Oh yeah, very much so.
And what do you think about how magic has been used by those in power, who are more the majority? Do you think that that's a different type of magic, or do you think that they don't do magic at all?
Oh, I think they do magic, yeah. Some of them probably. There's for every person who's trying to stop a bulldozer bulldozing a forest, there's some twat out there probably trying to keep their local place where they live in a city a Muslim free zone. using those political stickers. This is a Muslim-free zone. That's a kind of, I see that as a kind of magic. The attempt to command and control space through political stickers. A friend of mine, Phil Lagarde, he's done these great. Him and his wife Layla, they've done these great. This is a Pan control zone sticker, and it's kind of got a little image of Pan on it. It says things like, you know, take drugs, you know, drink, eat, and be merry, kind of thing. And they definitely use those as a counter to a lot of the right-wing political stickering that goes on. And I see that as a valid act of magic.
So how do you define magic? Now I'm curious as to how you, because if placing a sticker can be seen as an act of magic, so how would you define magic? Is it any act of asserting yourself and your will in the world, the form of magic, or has there anything that is more specific to magic?
I would say it is anything which enables you to assert your own sense of agency in the world. I mean, I think one of the major reasons I got involved in the whole magical thing was because I felt I lacked agency. I had no control of my life, and doing magic gave me that sense of, you know, of agency, of self-possessiveness, which I think I lacked at the time, you know. Now, beyond that, I don't really have a lot to say on that score.
So you would also include mundane ways of asserting.
Yeah, magical, you know, mundane. I mean, it's a terrible word, isn't it? I mean, it's kind of like, oh, mundane reality. I just don't like it. You know, why make a separation? You know, enchantment is where you find it. You know, once you start splitting off your world and have all this bit's spiritual and this bit's not spiritual, this bit's mundane, and bit's bollocks that. Not my favorite thing.
Yeah, that's that's something that I understand how you would think that. I think that sometimes dividing things is a way of understanding them, not necessarily as seeing them as ontologically separate in themselves, but it's sometimes separating things and using different terms is a way of understanding all the nuances and what distinguishes one act from another, but that doesn't necessarily imply that they are not ultimately one thing from an ontological, metaphysical point of view.
Yeah, that's true, but it's very easy to get trapped in that, you know, dualistic binary thinking. And it's something I try and avoid.
Okay, that's understandable. And let me see. I think that there are some questions from people. Thank you, Vocatus. It's nice to see you here. And Arcane Magic is asking, Phil Hine, what are your thoughts on demonolatry?
What's that then?
Pardon?
What's that then?
What is demonolatry? Demonolatry is the worship of demons.
I've summoned demons. I went through a phase of doing stuff when I lived in Leeds with Crowley's Goetia. That was great fun.
Is there anything that you feel comfortable sharing about those experiences?
Yeah, I had this friend who was really interested in coming up with a novel, a sort of demonology for the Chaos Magic age. So we thought we'd try some traditional methods first, you know, just to try them out, kind of thing. So I was living in this one-room flat in Bellevue Road, actually. I don't know if you know it. And I didn't have space for a separate temple, so we created a magic circle on the floor with sticky tape, I think it was, and biro-ed in the god names, and we had a bit of wood with a triangle on it. And we started experimenting, calling up creatures from Crowley's Goetia, which was interesting. And there was one time some friends of mine who had an occult shop in Hull got cursed. I mean, somebody sent them a really interestingly nasty curse object through the post, you know, a real classic piece of work of art. I wish I'd kept it or donated it to the Witchcraft Museum, but I think we just threw it out in the end. Anyway, we got this thing that these people had sent. Oh, they'd also given them like a week of really threatening, abusive phone calls as well, just to soften them up. We got this thing that they sent, stuck it in the triangle, and did an evocation of, I think it was Horis or Glaciella Bolus, I forget which, but it's all in the book somewhere, possibly. And we did a big kind of like Goetic evocation. And at some point, one of us said, oh, well, you know, bring your legions with you as well. And suddenly the room seemed to be like full of all these like black cloud with all insect wings coming out of it. And we just put them in the triangle and said, go and get the fuckers who've done this. And off they went. I don't know what happened, but, you know, my friends in the occult shop said they felt better and they didn't get any more threatening phone calls.
Mm.
So we did a lot of stuff like that. I think we probably did 2 or 3 turning back curses on people, and maybe cursed somebody as well. It was, you know, not something I'd do nowadays, but it seemed to be the right thing to do at the time. So I have no problems with that. As I say, I don't do it nowadays. There's, you know, really wrathful tantric deities that you can do puja to if you need to shut somebody up, but I don't really feel the need to do that sort of thing nowadays. But demons, yeah, I have no problem with that. If that's your question.
Yeah, the question was your thoughts about worshipping demons and I guess working with demons.
Well, so it's not really worshipping them, is it? It's kind of like you know. I think Alan Moore put it quite well in one of his Promethea comics. You know, like, you give us jobs to do and then we go off and do them. And it seemed to us that the more jobs we gave them to do, the more they created a kind of like weird shit in our lives, so that we'd call them up and give them jobs to do. It all got very kind of like self-referential in the end, and we just kind of like thought enough's enough. The last time we did it actually was over some people who'd been queer bashed. And we called up, you know, one of these demonic entities and their legions, and just not so much against the person who'd done the queer bashing, but the whole idea that it was fine to beat up queers and women, because there were a lot of queer people and women getting, you know, physical and verbal abuse in our area. So we thought, let's make the target that attitude and go and hit that target with a load of demons. And that had some results, you know.
So that just brings me the question. So when you summoned demons, you used the Aleister Crowley's Goetia. So there was some structure to the ritual. So do you think that it would have been just as effective to try and summon a demon without any of that ritualism? Or do you think that to summon that specific entity, you needed that ritualism?
Well, that was the interesting thing, because when we first started doing it, we didn't bother with a lot of the trappings, if you like, and it didn't seem to work very well. So eventually we called up one of these demons and said, look, how would you like us to, you know, summon you? What are you, for you, are the ideal conditions? And there were several of us present, and we all got these sort of like ideations or visions of a dark room with loads of smoky incense and, you know, kind of like necromancer cellar kind of decor. And we thought, well, we can't really do that, but we'll do our best, you know. So I got the idea that the ritual structure was part of the experience, so that the ritual structure kind of like framed that experience, and that the demons were part of that whole, if you like, phenomenal experience. So yeah, there did seem to be a relationship between the way the ritual was structured and the experience of, you know, obviously this subjective, highly dubious experience of having these things pop up and walk around the room.
And yeah, that just brings me, you know, my researcher curiosity just leads me to beg the question. So does it mean that then ritualism does have some importance in the effectiveness of magic?
I think it can do, but it depends on the ritual, you know. Often it depends what, again, it's about emotional engagement and what you like and what you don't like. I've seen people do makeup rituals on the spot and find them highly effective and be really turned off by doing like a traditional Ganesha puja. I remember doing a very traditional Ganesha puja one time at a big meeting in I think Hebden Bridge, and some people are really into it and really had a good and valuable experience out of it, and other people just say that was really boring. All that mantra, all that. There was no, there's nothing. They were used to kind of exciting mode. So I think ritual does structure our experience, but it's very much on how we approach it as individuals, or if you like, collectively. Because obviously group norms and group stuff also has an effect on it. Complicated, as I say. It's not all subjective, but it's kind of intersubjective, if you like.
So it's like that rituals have an importance insofar as the practitioner can connect with the ritual and is not put off by it.
Yeah, that depends on people's. Some people like one type of ritual, other people are fairly eclectic. What's interesting about a lot of tantric ritual is that it has a kind of like fractal quality to it. So if you're a practitioner, if you're used to doing the ritual, any part of the ritual can actually stand for the whole ritual. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Which I think is a very interesting thing, because it's kind of like the philosophy underlying it means that every part of the ritual is ultimately about losing that distinction between you and your chosen deity. So any part of the ritual can be an enactment of the whole ritual. That's how that works, but I'm not sure that you could take that into another domain and have it be effective, but try it and see,
Thank you, Jeanette, for the super sticker. And then we have another question from Cyberview. Can you comment on the influence of Julius Evola et al. On the Chaos Magick tradition? So do you think that Julius Evola had an influence on Chaos Magick?
No, obviously not, because he was dead, long before it started, I think. Yeah, well, I think some Chaos magicians are really into Julius Evola. I'm not one of them. I did, I think, read one of his books favorably when I was in my early 20s and thought, oh, this is really good. And obviously I got to know better, but if I have to say, if there's one group of people who are into Chaos Magick and like Julius Evola, it tends to be right-wing libertarians. I'm not one of those, so no, not one of my favorite people.
And he's also asking, Kenneth Anger helped to solidify the queer left-hand path mythos. What do you think about that?
I don't know, because I'm not really that familiar with Kenneth Anger.
Okay.
I like his films, but apart from that, I don't really know.
Okay, so we have another question again. So there is tons of politics in the magic communities these days, like it has infected all religious congregations, tons of far-right fascist magic. Crowley ever tried to get Liber into Hitler's hands? I'm not sure if that is a question.
Yeah, and so what? I mean, but magic and politics have always gone hand in hand, as far as I can see. It's not a new thing. Again, one of the things I did in this little booklet, Acts of Magical Resistance, was look at some historical stuff about magic and politics. Like in 17th century England, you could be done for sedition for casting the horoscope for the king. Because if you did the horoscope for the king, it kind of implied that you might want to find out when's a good time to have him killed. So casting a horoscope in 17th century England was a political act. And if you look at a lot of 19th century magicians, heavily into politics of both strikes. So yeah, it's this idea that magic and politics shouldn't mix, I think, is rubbish, but that's just my opinion. If you look into history, look into world cultures, you'll find magic and politics mixing all the time. India's a good case in point. A lot of tantrics agitated against the British during the colonial period. Even nowadays, you could call it religion, you call it politics, but Baglamukhi, who's a very wrathful deity, is often propitiated by politicians who want to get her on their side. This, you know, it's widespread right across the world. Religion and politics have always been bedfellows, as far as I can see. Again, the idea that they should keep the two domains separate.
That's not what I said. I don't know if you're referring to me, but that's not what I said.
No, I'm not referring to you. I'm referring to a hypothetical listener who thinks that magic and politics, or magic and religion, should always, or religion and politics, magic and politics should be separate things. And I've met people who cleave very much to that idea, but it's never been something for me, I'm afraid.
Yeah, sure. I think that magic intersects with everything, not just politics. And that's one of the arguments that I always make as to why it's important to research it, because it's so difficult for us academics to research magic and esotericism, because it's considered something that is not part of society. And it very much is, not just in politics, but it really intersects with everything. I know that we're probably not referring to our conversation, but in my case, with my project, I focus on the esoteric side, which is not a way of negating that there is a political side. And when there is a sense in addressing a certain political viewpoint or a certain political core to a specific tradition, I would cover it. But since I am a religious studies scholar, I think that it is more intellectually honest for me to focus on that side and not enter into politics, which is not part of my academic background, and that would enter the realm of personal opinions. And I don't do personal opinions on this channel, unless it is, of course, interviewing a practitioner where they would share their opinion, and that is fine, because it's similar to the interview that I would have with a practitioner as an anthropologist. Since what I try and offer on my channel, on my project, is what the scholarship says, you will find that either papers focus on the political side. There are definitely papers on the political aspects of Crowley, for instance. I'm thinking about the doctoral work by Marco Pasi, professor at the University of Amsterdam, which focused on the politics in Aleister Crowley. So there are definitely papers that gear more towards the political side, but for the most part, addressing esotericism from a religious studies point of view focuses on the religious studies side. And in a way, it also helps to understand the subject matter, looking at those points specifically. So it's more a matter of focus as opposed to a matter of exclusion, because then you can focus on the political side if you want. Nobody stops you. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah, sorry, I dozed off a sec. Well, sure, I wasn't addressing you. I was addressing a hypothetical listener. It's just something that pisses me off, because there's still this perception that magic and politics should be kept in separate domains.
So is there anything else that you'd like to cover in this interview? I don't know if you have...
I don't think so. I hope people continue to buy my books and enjoy them, and maybe get something out of them. It's always nice to get feedback. No, I think that's it. I think we've covered everything. Thanks for having me. It's been a very stimulating discussion.
Thank you for being here. I really appreciate you being here.
Okay, thank you.
Bye. So thank you all guys for being here. And as you guys know, this project is supported by you guys. So if you want to support it, you know all the ways to do it via PayPal and Patreon, and you find all the links down below. And you also find all the contact details of Phil Hine, his links and the names of his books. So you will find, if you want to follow up this conversation and get in touch with Phil Hine, you can do so. You find all the information in the description box. Also, if you like this video, don't forget to smash the like button. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Thank you to Joao and Andrew for moderating the chat. I'm sorry that I always forget to mention you guys, but finally I remembered. So thank you so much for moderating the chat. I want to know what you guys thought about this conversation. Let me know all in the chat. And yeah, I hope that you all guys stay tuned for all the academic fun. Bye for now.